I'm a Senior Business Partner Manager for Virtualization and Cloud within Red Hat, but recently I've been mistaken for a rap artist because in anticipation of the dining in the dark experience this evening, I've been wearing my sunglasses indoors everywhere I go. So that's one thing. Another thing is I'm very into safaris now, so I was thinking of getting some night vision goggles, so again I could go into the restaurant downstairs and steal food off of people's plates, unbeknown to them. So that, unfortunately, that didn't transpire, that didn't work out. But one thing about animals, safari and everything else, I'm going to draw a very, very loose parallel here, is I'll be illustrating the virtualization market, certainly from the Red Hat perspective, but also how we plan on addressing that market. Because, you know, as human beings, you know, we're very selfish, we're very competitive about how we compete for resources, whether that be food or customers. So I'll be talking to you about how we plan on competing within the virtualization market against incumbent vendors, the obvious ones included. So the agenda slide is a little bit lost, but here we go. So I'll be talking about REV as a technology, so that stands for Red Hat Enterprise Virtualization, for those of you that didn't know that. Some of the market dynamics around that, around virtualization in general, and then start going to some of the components of REV and how you can put it into context with other virtualization hypervisor technologies. And then I'll start talking about, going back to that whole thing about competing and how we compete for customers, why it's the most secure, scalable and performant and low-cost hypervisor and management technology in the marketplace. So I'll just go back a couple of slides. So the obligatory company slide, so I'm not going to do a massive Red Hat advert for you here. I'm going to assume a little bit of prior knowledge, but as an organisation we've been working for about in excess of a decade. Back in 1999, during the heady days of the dot-com boom, we made an initial public offering to the market that enabled us to raise a certain amount of seed capital. And rather than buy a private jet or have a really big party, unfortunately we spent it on creating a number of different support centres around the world so that we could support customers in the event that they had a problem with the operating system. So we created a commercial release that was stable in 2002, and when I say stable, it was a fixed release. It wouldn't change for up to 10 years now. That is the case. And we also acquired another company called JBoss, so that enabled us to expand the value of open source outside of the operating system into middleware. So think of it as a .NET alternative, for example. And we also acquired a company called Cymrunet that I'll come on to that enabled us to, again, add open source efficiencies to the virtualization hypervisor. We joined the Standard & Poor's 500, so essentially, you know, the external market viewed us as worthy of joining that list or being part of that list, which is nice. And we've started to build our CloudForms and OpenShift proposition, which is all about infrastructure as a service, platform as a service. So customers then can leverage open source technologies within the cloud and do everything from developing the application to using the application without having to do anything locally. And then finally, in 2012, we acquired Gluster. So Gluster is all about scaled out data access. So customers can access data using scaled up or scaled out proposition. Scaled out is more cost effective and lends itself well to our cloud strategy anyway, because most data will be a scaled out type environment. And there's a picture of our CEO, Jim Whitehurst. He's ex-Boston Consulting Group. He was the person that bailed or stopped Delta Airlines from going bankrupt, essentially, during September 11th or post-September 11th. So he has a track record in saving companies from disaster, which is something, a talent that he won't be using with Red Hat, most likely, because Red Hat have just achieved their first $1 billion in terms of revenue, have around about $1 billion in the bank. So as I say, we're not an organisation in immediate danger. Which is nice, so because enterprise organisations like to deal with other large organisations, and if they're going to bet their virtualisation strategy with them, which is our hope. So, can everyone see me? Yeah, okay. So essentially, this is an overview of KVM. So this is kernel virtual machine. So we acquired this technology from an organisation called Cymrunet. Cymrunet, some of the founders are now working at, sorry, the Cumbernet founder then created what was behind Zen, which became a project, which became a company, which is now part of Citrix. So that founder then created Cumbernet, which created KVM, which is a technology that leveraged the virtualization features within the Intel CPU technology. So what they did was they had about a dozen developers, so not a huge amount or number of developers, and they released that open source code, which was very quickly adopted within the Linux kernel. So that's important because that means there's thousands of developers that are essentially supporting the ongoing development of KVM as a technology. Red Hat added to that list, so they contributed to that list, they contributed to features behind KVM, so we got behind that as a technology. IBM recognized it as viable hypervisor technology and also did the same. They created something called Solid Ice, which is essentially a very performant protocol that enables customers to do things like online video conferencing, so they call it SPICE, which forms part of our VDI technology offering. Cisco, again, they recognized the potential and contributed to it. Intel, for obvious reasons, contributed to it, and so on and so forth. So then Red Hat acquired them in around about 2009, 2010, and created the first release, 2.1 and 2.2. So even though it wasn't a hugely mature technology at that time, it started to achieve some of the performance leadership benchmarks with SpecVert, a site that obviously tests all of that, or represents the testing of all of those technologies. And it started to gain recognition within the Info World article, and also something called the Open Virtualization Alliance was formed. So that's a consortium of vendors that want to foster the adoption of KVM and build an ecosystem around KVM. And I'll come on to that later. And then there was something called Overt, which is a project that Red Hat have sponsored to help the future of the management technology behind KVM. So that was also born. And Red 3.0, as is the case with most software releases, they're always a little late, was released in January of this year. Okay, so what is KVM and how is it packaged? So essentially, if a customer buys Red Hat Enterprise Linux, they get it within the operating system, or you can buy it alone as a standalone product, a thin hypervisor, essentially. So the question could be, well, if you get it already, or you can get it in the operating system, you can do an operating system virtualization. Why would you buy Rev? And the answer simply is, you can't really scale when you buy it as part of the operating system. You can have virtual guests and everything else, but it's not all about just having virtual guests, but it's about managing that workload and having visibility of what they're doing, what their performance is, and how much of the utilization they're using in terms of CPU memory and all that sort of thing. So that's essentially what customers will buy Rev for. So it's in 5.1 or Red Hat Enterprise Linux 5.1 and above, but they'll buy Rev to manage a large Linux estate. That's essentially the value behind it. Okay, so a quick look at some of the market driving factors. So cost reduction, as we've heard from our learned friend from the IDC, that's one factor, that's one obvious factor. But customers are being more astute about that. They're not just looking at the hardware element. They're looking at storage and how virtualization can reduce costs there. And also looking at how the journey to the cloud can reduce costs in the overall application that they use. Disaster recovery, business continuity, so virtualization is a cheap, or could be a cheap DR methodology, being able to migrate a guest from a physical host to another physical host or within a cluster is a really cheap DR solution that helps customers be more compliant and demonstrate their compliancy. Server and storage consolidation. I was talking to a stranger on the train about this, and I'm sad enough to do that. This person sits within the same unit as the server virtualization people, so it's all it's all coming together in that respect. So I'll be talking about a solution encompassing exactly that, called FlexPod, which is a Red Hat, NetApp, and Cisco solution. Flexible environments, testing environments. So Specsavers is one of our lighthouse customers using our technology. So they have created a website where you can buy all of the products online, obviously. And they develop that, they write it, in a virtual environment, they test it, user test it within a virtual environment, and they deploy for production use within a virtual environment as well. So you can see how a customer can do all of that using virtualization technologies and encapsulating those stages. Business agility, I've been in the IT industry a while, although it may not look it, of course. The paperless office is obviously not a reality. I still print out my emails. But things like business agility, IT organizations, vendors have been speaking about it for a long time. But it is actually happening, in terms of being able to provision a virtual guest rather than have to buy new hardware and create, an operating system, an application, and all that sort of thing. They can just use what they have and use it really efficiently and wisely, and move guests around. So it's really exciting from that perspective. And then the final point, data center automation. So the ability to live migrate virtual guests from one physical host to another without any interruption to the data is really critical, and that's obviously happening and can happen using virtualization technology. So there's a number of driving factors behind it, to name a few. So this is just a representation of customers that are looking at a dual vendor strategy or looking at adopting a dual vendor strategy. So half of them are already looking at dual source. So they're already looking at two hypervisors. One could be on the desktop, and another one could be at server. It could be both on the server, who knows. And the other 27% are looking to go dual source, and I'll talk about some of the motivating factors behind some of that. And the other 24 are planning on getting fleeced by their existing virtualization vendor by all accounts, and I'm going to stay with them. But one of the interesting write-ups by eWeek is that they did a test around Rev, and one of the points, the summary is that it is a technology that is viable in virtualizing within the data center, which is really important. It's an important point to remember. And is key for Red Hat because the data center is our sweet spot. So it plays well with what with our customer base, essentially. A little bit more about the eWeek review. So one of the points is it's all around the management and machine density. So those are the things that are key to a virtualization strategy within the data center, because you're going to be managing a large scaled out distributed data center, and you need to be able to manage all of those guests efficiently and have visibility of a large consolidated estate. CIO, they're basically talking about the interoperability and performance scalability, all things I'll be speaking about in a moment. And IDC, they speak about the fact that Red Hat have been successful in commoditizing technologies and reducing the cost of entry for technologies in the past, and will do so, are likely to do so with our virtualization technology. So that's always good to hear from external sources. So coming on to the data center virtualization at the moment, or virtualization in general. So one of the Gartner researches is that on the left-hand side, about 50 to 60% of customers are virtualizing on x86 workloads. However, most of them are confined to tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 applications and dev test environments rather than mission critical. If you look at the Red Hat customer base, of the base that we've surveyed, around about 10% of those are virtualizing, and most of them are within a dev test type environment. So there's all of this opportunity in terms of T1, T2, Tier 3 applications and the mission critical workloads that we want to go after. Because essentially the customers trust us for the operating system, so there's no reason why they wouldn't trust us for the virtualization technology as well. So I'm just getting my 5-minute signal. So I'm going to have to speed up my speaking. So some examples of some of the organizations that are deploying Rev currently. So Specsavers I've spoken about, Dreamworks, it all started with them running a private data center using Rev technology. And they're now essentially virtualizing their back office as well, so it's expanded throughout that organization. NTT, IBM have used it to build their cloud, so there's some big names there. So the adoption, those big names will surely follow with other large enterprises. Okay, quick couple of moments on what Rev actually is. So if you look at VMware, during my VMware bashing exercise this is turning to be, organizations, when they buy VMware, they're going to buy the vCenter products, they're going to buy the virtual RAM technology, or pay for the virtual RAM, the use of virtual RAM, as well, and they'll have ESX thrown in for nothing. But they'll also have to pay for some of the other features like live migration, for example. When a customer buys Rev, all they have to worry about is the number of sockets they're running, and that is pretty much it. So they'll get the manager, they'll get all of the migration features within it, and they'll get the hypervisor. So that's all the customer needs to worry about. So I'll come up with some of the cost proof points, but as you can see, it's a very simple way of paying for and predicting your future virtualization budget. So our message to the customers is really, you know, virtualization is great, it obviously reduces costs, but how about you devote less of that budget to virtualization and use it for innovation? Okay, so let's talk about some of the proof points in about 3 minutes. So that's going to be interesting. So if you look at the Open Virtualization Alliance, this is the consortium I was referring to, headed up by HP, IBM, Intel, and Red Hat. So it's all about creating an ecosystem of vendors around the product. So it's in their interests, certainly HP and IBM, to do that because they have they've invested a lot in an open source strategy and open source technologies. So some of the examples here are Acronis, who will be speaking later, so they help us with P2V and V2V migration, and some of the others there, NetApp I've spoken about before. You know, you can read that for yourself, but you know, there's a huge amount of adoption with vendors that are looking to support the technology. BMC, for example, around, you know, the management of the cloud, of cloud, which virtualization obviously leads into. Okay, so I'm going to skip over this slide very quickly, but essentially Overt is a project, much like Fedora, that enables us to add functionality to our virtualization technology. So the reason why that's interesting and useful to know is because you know, VMware have a bit of a march on. They've been doing this for 10 years or so. We are almost on parity in terms of functionality. This helps us to develop parity and also future-proofs our technology for future functionality. And essentially, you know, if you haven't got it already, it's all about management and virtualization for the data center. So the kind of proof points we're talking about are high availability, live migration, storage management, the kind of features that customers are looking for to make virtualization within the data center viable and trustworthy and, you know, enterprise class, essentially. I am going to skip that. My colleague will cover that. This is a slide about VRAM tax. This is essentially the cost proof point of using Rev versus vSphere 4 and vSphere 5. vSphere 4 is about two times more costly than Rev. vSphere 5, because of the VRAM tax, is even more. So, you know, in terms of the proof points, cost-wise, I think they speak for themselves. In terms of scalability and performance, which are my last two slides, Red Hat have beaten VMware on the have achieved the top 6 results and beating VMware within the SpecVert website. So essentially you can read that for yourself, but in terms of scalability, performance and machine density, we've excelled and beaten them in all of those key areas, which is a key criteria that most customers judge a virtualization technology on. So, you know, not much we need to say about that. So in terms of performance, which is a slide that I'll end on, this is an example of some of the data center workloads that we're going after. Oracle, for obvious reasons, you know, it's massive in the data center. SAP is the one that I'll hang my hat on because we have a really good relationship with them, and that's the workload that I'm particularly chasing. Near native performance, so customers can barely see the difference between a physical and a virtual application, or an application running within a virtual or physical environment. So again, performance is key, and I think we can demonstrate it. And the only other thing I will say is, obviously, I could go on for ages, that is clear. So rather than listen to me, you can hear a little bit more about Red Hat's view and IDC's view by signing up to this webinar. And it should be very interesting because it goes into more of the detail that I haven't had an opportunity to provide you with. So I would suggest you sign up to that and you know, hear it from those two sources. And with that, I shall end and hand over to Peter Parsons.